Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray of the EAFC video game and the Bundesliga. You're listening to the SFF Podcast World Cup Special, the home of World Cup 26 banter.
5,814 days until World Cup 2026 gets underway. Confused? On this latest World Cup episode of the SFF podcast, we're going back in time to have a look back at the 2006 and 2010 tournaments in Germany and South Africa, respectively. I'm John, and joining me for the second consecutive podcast is a man who Roy McGregor wants to send back to Africa. It's Ellen's finest, Dr. Grant Campbell. Long time no speak, good mate.
I love that intro. Yeah, Ross County will be banning me from Dingwall, no doubt about that. Good to be on, John. Thanks very much for inviting me on for this. And I love a throwback, especially in a period of my life which was a really good time. And looking forward to chatting about the World Cups in 06 and 2010.
Yeah, well, this would obviously take you back to your teens. It takes me back to my 20s. But also joining us is our technical director, a man who loves a throwback, as you'll have seen from our YouTube short series, the SFF's original Sato, Krys Kajawa. How are you, boss?
I'm good. I'm not saying this is well timed, but Saturday was 2006. Next weekend, 2010. So perfectly timed, John. Well done.
Thanks very much. Anyway, and completing the lineup is a man who'd love to go back in time to a year ago when Hibs were the talk of the capital and their rivals were nowhere. It's the third proclaimer, Charlie Banks. Welcome back, mate.
I thought we were talking about World Cups, no club football, but yes, good to be on. It's been a few weeks since I was last time I was on. I had Rangers winning the league, and look how that went. So, all good here though.
You're predicting Hearts to win the league now, right?
No, I'm still predicting Celtic.
Oh, for God, no, that sounds good.
I'm surprised you've not got the hoops on, but it looks as though you've got a blue hoop with your t-shirt. So something's going on there.
No, I'll wait till Saturday. Put the hoops on just if Celtic win the league. But up until then, I'm not thinking football exists.
Yeah. Blue hoops is Morton anyway. They've done their job. They've survived.
Yeah, Rab McCahill will like you for that. But anyway, let's part the club chat, although clubs will probably come at some point. So let's go back to, remember these days Scotland didn't qualify for the World Cup? Happened quite a lot, actually. So we're looking back to two tournaments where we didn't qualify for in Germany and South Africa. So in terms of Germany, our hopes for that were gone before we began. 2 points in the first three games, of which 2 games were at home. Berti Vogts left after 1-0 draw against Moldova. Walter Smith came in. There was a wee bit of a revival, but ultimately came too late and we couldn't get that second place. What's your memories of that campaign? Starting with you, Chris.
As you say, not very good. The Vogts stuff was... I fell out with Vogts after the friendly against Romania, where I seen how great the team camaraderie was when nobody gave John Kennedy support after that injury. And in fact, Colin Cameron came out in favour of his club mate, the one that tackled him. So that for me, that was it done. But the results then kicked on for there and proved that it just wasn't to be. So I was glad he went. I think Tommy Burns took charge for one of the games before we got Walter Smith in properly. And I would say Walter Smith probably did better after this tournament. But it was always on it hiding nothing after this one because it was done already.
And Grant, going back to that era, because Walter Smith was actually out of club football from 2002, so he would have been available even prior to that World Cup. With hindsight, when we lost 6-0 in the playoff to Netherlands, that cost us yours 2004, do you think the SFA at that point would have been more advised to say, ditch the Berti Vogts experiment and try and get Walter Smith in at that point, and it could have seen a better story with us getting to that World Cup?
It was hard to gauge. I guess probably in hindsight, possibly yes, but you look at the quality of players we had back then. We're still relying on Kenny Miller to run the channels for us. I mean, no disrespect to Kenny, fantastic player, but he could only do with the best he's got, really. And we just really struggled for goals, didn't we? We didn't win a lot of games, as you mentioned there, as Chris has mentioned as well. But, we did finish the campaign on a positive note with that win in Slovenia, which was a very good win. But it just came too little too late. I mean, the start of the campaign was a disaster. Particularly that night in Moldova where we only drew 1-1. One of the rare goals Stephen Thompson scored in a Scotland shirt. I mean, it just was a pretty miserable start to the campaign, and it was just a frustrated group campaign because there's a lot of things just didn't click for us. We just weren't at it. I remember the Belarus game where I was actually on holiday with the family down in Devizes. That's how long ago this was. And I remember David Begg on commentary. And I was listening to the game, and after 5 minutes we were a goal down, and it was just an abysmal night for us. But yeah, it's hard to gauge, but let's be brutally honest, John. It was at a time where Scotland were really at their lowest ebb, or one of their lowest ebbs, certainly.
Yeah, I think we can hold the beer in terms of lowest ebb because we're going to come on to 2010 later. We'll park Scotland for now. But there were some SPL players, as it was then, the SPL, who went to the World Cup. Two of them were Poland, Artur Boruc and Maciej Sarewski, of course, played for Celtic. You had Tazo Purso of Rangers going to World Cup with Croatia. Shinzuki Nakamura went with Japan. Hamid Namuchi, there's a blast for the past, was in the Tunisia squad. But of course, it became easier for a lot of Scots to support a certain team because Trinidad and Tobago were in this World Cup in the same group as England. And just to throw in there, Marvin Andrews was in the squad, Russell Latipe and Denzel Theobald, who I didn't know played for Falkirk, were in the squad. Colin Samuel was there. And then you had two First Division players in Kelvin Jack of Dundee, and of course Jason Scotland, who became a national icon. This is how desperate we were for supporting them. Support a team with Scotland in it and make a song out of them that got into top 40, and it meant every English station had to play it. Charlie, halcyon days.
Aye, that's actually the first World Cup I can remember Scotland qualifying for, but we didn't qualify. It was Jason. But no, it was that was the first World Cup I remember. I was only 9 that World Cup. Sorry for making you all feel really old, but no, I remember there was a wee bit of a buzz about it in my school, at least. Like, so many players from the league are going. Did give it a wee bit of an extra. Obviously, it's a World Cup; you're going to watch it closely anyway. But it was nice just to watch and see how all the players were getting on. I didn't really care what club team they played for when they were playing. It was just nice to, and it did give an extra bit of a bite when Trinidad and Tobago played England, because you wanted, obviously, all the Scottish players to do well, but even more so that they were playing England. So, first World Cup I remember, and obviously loads of Scottish league players were there, which is always really good.
Yeah, I mean, Krys, obviously, there's a few Celtic players amongst that. And they just obviously won the title that year. But the Trinidad and Tobago story, of course, it's just incredible to see them at a major tournament.
Yeah, that like CONCACAF is like a whole massive amount of teams in there, but you always expect the top sort of USA, Mexico, Canada, more recently. But back then, it was those two. Costa Rica also made it to this World Cup, but they were another one that obviously we knew about too much. So Trinidad and Tobago coming out of there was a terrific sort of shock. Similar to the way like Jamaica had done it like 8 years previous at France '98. That was a kind of big thing. So yeah, just from a purely neutral perspective, it was good to see a name like Trinidad and Tobago. But then of course, neutral goes out the window because they were playing England.
Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of host nation, so Germany got picked to be the host nation. South Africa were in for this tournament, but they obviously would get 2010. Morocco, who will eventually get it in 2030, they just kept bidding for any World Cup and never got it. And of course, England had a big bid that fell by the wayside, and Germany, pretty good hosts, you have to say. And this was the first World Cup since 1970 where the hosts kicked off the opening game. In the World Cups in between times, it was the holders that were kicking off. Grant, that must have been a bit of a shock to the system at that point, having grown up knowing that the holders like Brazil and France were kicking off before. Now this time it was Germany.
Yeah, well, I remember 2002 very well because obviously France won 98, and I just remember the latter stages of 98 because I was only 7 at the time, and then I really kind of got into Euro 2000, and that was really sort of the first major tournament that I always remember. But 2002 was obviously that infamous game where Papa Bouba Diop got the goal that Senegal that beat France, and that was a quite extraordinary match, and forever, in my opinion, will be one of the greatest shocks in World Cup history. But in terms of this 2006 tournament, obviously that opening game, Germany, Costa Rica, a fantastic atmosphere in the Allianz that game. And I don't know about what everyone else thinks, but I just thought this game was made by the sheer quality of goals in this match. And I thought the performances in particular of Philip Lahm, who has gone on to have a wonderful career and has had a brilliant career, in the game. And obviously Miroslav Klose really sort of continued his love affair with the World Cup in this tournament. He was absolutely magic for Germany. But there was a toss-up what was the best goal in this game, because Lahm scored a great goal, but then Torsten Frink scored an absolute screamer right to the end of the game. So it was a really good book of the game, really, in terms of quality. And then obviously for Costa Rica, you had the wonderful Paulo Wanshop, who really was a household name in English football, getting a brace in the game. I mean, that was probably the household name in that Costa Rica team. But Costa Rica played a part in this game, but the story was all about the quality of goals in this game, and just lit up a tremendous start to the tournament. And in my opinion, at least, the most eye-catching opening game at a World Tournament so far in my lifetime. That opening game, you had the favourites, the hosts, going out with a bit of a bang to start the tournament, but Costa Rica also playing their part. And it was a shame for them in many ways that they ended up finishing with no points in the group, because they played a real part in that opening game. But Germany were excellent, and it was a fantastic match for the neutral, but also just a fantastic advert for the start of the tournament.
Speak for yourself, Grant. I was quite glad Costa Rica finished with 0 points. But no, I even like you hit on it. The goals in this game were phenomenal. It kind of set the scene for the whole World Cup, because how many goals were scored outside the box in this World Cup? Having said that, yeah, the first one-chop goal, the pass through to him is just sublime.
Superb.
Was this the World Cup? All the goalkeepers and stuff are moaning about the football.
I think so. Yeah. Because one of them said. There was two back-to-back where they had the problem with the ball. This was one of them. I'm pretty sure it was.
I thought so as well, because there's some goals that are scored in this tournament that are just like, you look at it and go, oh, maybe they're right. The ball does kind of swerve very strangely. Schweinsteiger was brilliant at it, especially. He seemed to get some swerve on that ball. But yeah, like you said, like the minute Philip Lahm scores the first goal in this, it sets the tone for the entire tournament. It was a fantastic opening game. I mean, 6 goals in a Germany opening game. It's not like that's never happened since.
Yeah. At least they were a wee bit more shared, but we're not talking about Euros. Let's just ditch all that chat.
No, just to be fair, like as you said, Germany being the hosts was absolutely fantastic. I wish the Germans would just host every tournament, because they do 100%. Such a terrific job of it. They put on such a great show, they put on such great organisation, and they price it properly. I mean, no, like the current World Cup is just hammered on that. The World Cup in 2006 was absolutely well priced, and it was a fantastic team from start to finish. It was the same with the Euros 2 years ago.
And the fans bring the colour as well, so they just add to it. So yeah, I'm in full agreement with Chris. Let's speak to FIFA and put that application in.
That's just one of the abiding images of 2006 World Cup. It's just so many German flags flying left, right, and centre. It is not something the Germans do often. They do it for the football, and it's so colourful. And I mean, I understand why the Germans don't do it. It's not like they have like a bad nationalistic history or anything. But this lets them do it. It gives them that opportunity. They get something to be proud of, and they do such a great job of it.
Yeah, they definitely do. And Charlie, what do you recall about not just that opening game, but also who were you kind of looking to follow other than Trinidad and Tobago?
That's a hard one. Trying to remember back. I've always been Brazil for the World Cups, I would say. But then I guess because it was my first World Cup, I was just happy to watch it. I think as the World Cups have progressed, I've really started nailing down, like, okay, I'll follow Brazil for this one, or I'll follow Spain for this one. But to be honest, anyone but England in every game, in every World Cup or Euros. So probably that. But definitely Definitely the South American teams, because I just love the way they play football, and obviously, John, we spoke to the guys who wrote Mundiales, and that encapsulated that, like how well they play football.
Yeah, that's an excellent book, that Mundiales by Tim Vickery and Mark Birham. So I nearly forgot your name, Mark.
Great guy, Tim Vickery. Yep.
And a good podcast. If you haven't heard it already, go back and listen.
100%.
Yeah, the book is absolutely tremendous. But Krys, you were obviously following Poland, given that obviously Scotland and Republic of Ireland weren't there, and huge expectation in terms of them trying to get out the group. But they couldn't quite recapture their previous World Cup in Germany, or West Germany in 74, out after just 2 games. But you were there, and you managed to get tickets to a game against Costa Rica. And yes, it may have been a dead rubber, but still a great experience for you.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on stories of the Poland 74 team, so I was well versed with that one. I was looking forward to the fact they were in Germany's group, so it was going to be a massive thing. The Poles all came over en masse across the border, and yeah, it was a fact. Like when I say the tournament so well organised, I know it from experience because I was fortunate enough to get along to that third group game for Poland and Costa Rica. As you say, it was a dead rubber because Germany and Ecuador had won the other 2 games, so it was done already. They 2 qualified. It was just a matter of pride. Personally, it was a matter of revenge for 1990. It's never going to heal that wound of Scotland losing to Costa Rica in Italia 90, but for me it was good. Costa Rica even took the lead, annoyingly, through a free kick. But 2 goals from a guy whose name amusingly I have had to learn properly because it's Bosatsky. Not Bosaki, like I was calling him in 2006, which did amuse me. But he managed to turn it around with 2 goals to corners. Like as you say, with the fact that Artur Boruc was in the team, Magic Żurawski was there as well. I actually went to the game with myself to talk with Żurawski in the back, and I know I wasn't alone because about 20 seats to the right of me were 2 guys wearing saltires, like actual just full on blue with white cross top. It's like, what are they there from? I'm pretty sure I've got a photo of they do somewhere as well. So yeah, the thing that always stuck for me though is just the national anthem when the Poles, because they had like about 3/4 of the stadium. Obviously Costa Rica's a bit of a trek to Germany, but Poland it's like nip across the border. I mean we were the game was in Hanover, which I don't think was a stadium they used for the Euros there. So that was a good experience. It was a decent stadium. I don't know why they didn't use it. Because there were too many to pick from, I guess. But we'd stayed in Hamburg, so we kind of drove down for the game. I say we stayed in Hamburg, I should say. We flew in to Hamburg-Lübeck, which is the equivalent of Glasgow-Prestwick. That's the closest it is to Hamburg. So yeah, it was a great time. And on the way back up after the game, there was the England-Sweden game on the radio. So we managed to get the British Forces radio. You know, like they cover. You sometimes hear them on Radio 5, sort of tuning into them. So we were able to get the radio as they were coming out of the road, and then obviously that game played out the way it did. My other abiding memory from this trip was sitting. We had to stop because the signal was starting to disappear. So we wanted to see how the game was going to end. I will never ever forget when Gerrard scored Terry Butcher saying, "Finally, a win against Sweden," because England had beat Sweden up to that point. They forgot to factor in the other guy who wasn't playing in Scotland at the time but was well known to us Scots, a certain Henry Larsson, getting that 90-odd minute winner, equaliser. Just deny them. Oh, it's such a great time. That was such a laugh.
Yeah, they forgot about a man who came on and turned that year's Champions League final.
Exactly, yeah. That's literally the last thing he'd done before this tournament. It was his very last game for Barcelona. They turned up to the Euros.
Yeah, unbelievable. And Grant, I mean, did you? I mean, obviously you would have been a neutral as well, but was there any horse in the race that you wanted to back for any kind of reason?
I think this was the first tournament I started following the African nations a bit more. So I kind of followed Ghana a little bit. They were obviously in the group with Italy, Czech Republic, and the United States. And I remember the Czechs thrashing the US in that opening game 3-0. Czechs were very impressive in that opening game. You know, they had a brilliant team, of course, with Kolar, Rosicki. Poboski was coming towards the end of his career. But I just felt that Ghana were just, the colour that they had was absolutely brilliant. You know, they had Asamoah Gyan, who was really started to become a really big player. John Mensah, obviously, was having a good career in the game. You had Michael Essien, who was at the top of his game for Chelsea at the time. Or coming towards that period, certainly. Even other players like Suleiman Tari, who were very good as well. But, you know, they were very, very good in the tournament. I mean, they brought a lot of colour to it. They had that good win against the United States, 2-1. They obviously beat the Czechs, which was an impressive win in their own right as well. So, you know, they obviously had Italy in that opening game, which was very, very tough for them. But, you know, they brought a lot of colour to proceedings. I mean, obviously they wouldn't go much further in the tournament after the group phase, but I just felt that this was the tournament where I felt that African football was started to slowly build a little bit of a reputation in a positive light. I mean, obviously we'll talk about 2010 shortly, but you even see it with more recent tournaments, the likes of Morocco doing very well, and even the likes of Egypt having their own moments as well. And it was really the first tournament that I felt that, obviously in 2002 you had South Korea and Japan really kind of lighting up that tournament, particularly South Korea, and it just felt that Africa had joined the world stage at this tournament, or had begun to put the wheels in motion of them cycling towards that stage. So that was really good. So that was the African nations I did follow, but I absolutely share the other guys' thoughts, particularly about Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, obviously I watched for a kind of neutral point of view. I mean, I didn't want them to win many games, but I watched a lot of England games in their group because, you know, they're on regularly. You see all the games, you know, and it's hard to switch off your television when they're on. But no, the group stage was fascinating across the board because, like, Togo played in this tournament. I don't think they've ever played a World Cup since. I mean, they'd had Adebayor, who was obviously a fantastic player, but it didn't quite happen for them. Tunisia didn't really rip up any trees in a very tough group with Spain and Ukraine, who were very good. You did Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire. You did Angola, who were in a very tough group as well. So the African nations had their troublesome periods, but Ghana were the shining beacon of light for the continent of Africa in this tournament. And I think many of my pals back then in school, I would have been in third year at school at the time in 2006, and you know, it was a good time following the World Cup at the point because we were really getting into it. And I think we all had like a sort of mini sweepstake at the time about which country we'd get, and I got Ghana, so that was another reason why I followed them as well. So yeah, good memories.
Right, come on, Charlie.
Just when you mentioned Ghana there, Grant, I was doing a wee bit of digging online as you were speaking. I actually remembered that Ghana played South Korea on a friendly Easter Road before that World Cup.
All right.
So me and my family went along. It was amazing. Like, I think 3/4 of the stadium were I think it was like they were African, maybe they were Ghanaian, I don't know, but the tribes, like, national dress was on and all the colour, and it was amazing. But like, even like, both teams went full strength. So I seen like Michael Essien, Park Ji-sung, all these guys that I watch on the TV, and they're playing on Easter Road's pitch, and it was a great day out. Like, me and my family went, but just as you were speaking, Graham, there, that was probably another, like, I sort of looked closely for those two after that game, just because, you know, the crowd was just amazing. Like, didn't matter who won, it was just a great day out.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that story. And one of the guys I didn't mention was Stephen Appiah, who was another fantastic player. Had a very decorated career. John Pansel as well, had a lot of experience in the Premier League. So Ghana just had a really good team back then, and were really building a very exciting team back then. And also we'll talk about them a bit more in 2010, I think.
You want to come in, Krys?
Yeah, no, I think Grant's right. I think that this tournament probably got Ghana the experience that helped them in 2010, and again we'll come on to that later. But I was just talking about the other African nations. I remember, I mean, a bit behind the scenes here, but John sent on like videos of all the goals in the two tournaments before this, and I was watching the 2006 one, and there was a game between Tunisia and Saudi Arabia. And I mentioned about 5 minutes ago about the Terry Butcher comment. There was a comment about Saudi Arabia scoring a winner to make it 2-1, only for Tunisia to get an equaliser in the 92nd minute. So that actually happened before it happened to England as well. But sadly, that was Tunisia's only point of the game, the tournament. So, but yeah, I agree.
Saudi Arabia's.
African nations are always good to watch. I mean, I'm of that vintage at 1990 is my first one, so Cameroon is always a team I look for because of that tournament.
Yeah.
They rarely do anything these days. But the Ivory Coast is another team we'll probably talk about across the two tournaments because they seem to get stuffed by the draw. Often, like they're a really good team, but they end up against other good teams.
They're to be the Switzerland of the African teams when they come to tournaments. Switzerland are such a solid team, but they always seem to get stuffy draws. Right away, just a quick word on that Tunisia game. Ridey Jidey got the equaliser in this game. He was a bit of a legend at Bolton Wanderers at the time. What a player! That Bolton teams back then under Big Sam Allardyce. Great memories.
Yeah, back in days when Bolton were getting European football and challenging for Champions League places and stuff like that. Incredible times. The team I was rooting for more was Australia. I've got family out in Australia. I've got my uncles out there. And this was the first World Cup they qualified since 1974 in West Germany. And in this tournament, they got their first victory with the victory over Japan by 3-goal win. Lost 2-0 to Brazil in the next game. The holders, no disgrace there. But then they got the 2-2 draw against Croatia to saw them through. And again, famous for Graham Poll, who was favourite to be the World Cup final referee that year, dishing out 3 yellow cards to Semenovic. And that was the end of his tournament.
Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that always is quite funny from that is Guy Mowbray's commentary of that game, because I think he says in the commentary, says, he's booked him 3 times and he hasn't shown him a red card yet. It was quite funny. And I know it's just quite an incredible game that, because, Australia had a very, very good side back then. Obviously Tim Cahill was in fantastic form. You had Kewell, you had Viduka. You had so many good players in there. Lucas Neal at the back. Craig Moore was still playing. One of my favourite, most underrated players in that sort of Blackburn teams of the past, Brett Emerton as well. Some really, really good players. But Croatia were always a very stuffy team. And this felt for me, I know Croatia did well in 98 and whatnot, but this was the start of them sort of recycling and going again. I felt this tournament, they really started to look like they were a team that were getting back to being that consistent team that were always getting to the business end of tournaments. But this game will always be talked about for that 3 yellow cards plus the red, which was,
Japan in that group as well. And Japan, obviously, we should have known they were going to be disappointing given that they lost the Kirin Cup that summer, just before the World Cup. Who did they lose to again? Yes, Scotland. The only trophy I think we've ever raised.
Not that any Celtic players were allowed to play in that because they were busy in a testimonial.
Yeah, they were too busy handing Alan Shearer a last-minute penalty.
We won't go there. But yeah, it was also the last year Australia played World Cup qualifiers under their own continent guys. It was after this tournament they moved to the Asian Confederation because they were fed up coming up against the South American teams. And then they got Uruguay, and they put Uruguay out in penalties, and then they went to the Asian. And it's worked for them because they've qualified every year. But we'll talk about 2010 later, but the team from Oceania actually did qualify for the next one. We'll also talk about that later. But they were arguably done by Italy in the next round with dodgy penalty in the last minute. So these things happen.
There's a Tim Minchin song that references that penalty, by the way.
Really?
a song called Context. If you want to look it up, brilliant song, by the way. It's so clever, and it mentions that penalty in it.
That's what I'm doing after this podcast. Brilliant. I love Tim Minchin.
But of course, there was a team that had the golden generation that was seen as their big. This was their big event. There's a documentary I've just started watching, the BBC, focused on this, and I mean the England team. England had a very good team that tournament, but I think part of their problems were they were relying so much on a couple of guys who were carrying injuries into the tournament. Like Michael Owen had only just come back from a major layoff, and then he did his knee during the tournament. Wayne Rooney broke his metatarsal second last game against Chelsea, and they basically rushed him back in. And England at no point showed, all right, they got through their group, but they didn't look very impressive in any of the games. No goal beat Paraguay, 2 late goals against Trinidad and Tobago, of which Peter Crouch pulls the Trinidad and Tobago player's hair to jump, even though he's already 2 foot on them. And then they drew with Sweden. Were quite fortunate against Ecuador as well to win that 1-0. David Beckham was actually sick before he took that free kick, scored the winner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Sweden game, On your
sorry.
grip.
Oh, no, my recollections of this run from England was that they were very lukewarm in this tournament. I don't think really it was working in this tournament. I don't think they got the balance right. I think Gary Neville's mentioned this very vividly on the overlap a number of times about this tournament. And, it just felt like this was a real opportunity missed for England, because we obviously remember 2002, they got to that quarter-final with Brazil and ultimately lost it because of that free kick from Ronaldinho. And you felt like that England were building ahead of steam going into this tournament. They felt like it was maybe their chance to maybe go a little bit further, because perhaps other nations were maybe not quite at their best or started to go through a bit of a transition phase. But in that group campaign, I mean, you mentioned the Paraguay game there, John. They were really poor in that game, but they scraped by. I thought Paraguay lacked a cutting edge in that game. Trinidad and Tobago defended exceedingly well in that game. And, I think the Gerrard goal at the end really gave them, it gave them a bit more of a fortuitous scoreline than it should have been. It was 2-0, but, I think Trinidad and Tobago were very unfortunate to lose 2-0. And then the Sweden game for me is remembered for that, incredible strike from Joe Cole, referenced by John Motson in particular, but it was a wonderful strike. But in the tournament, it just wasn't clicking for them. Even that game against Ecuador in the last 16, Beckham's free kick, it squirms in. It's not one of his best free kicks. I'm a massive fan of Beckham. I loved his career, but it was a squirm free kick. I just don't know did Sven overcomplicate it at times? He had so many good players in that team. Did he just overcomplicate it? Did he have too much to choose from? It's in some ways a little bit like Thomas Tuchel, I guess, with this current World Cup coming up. But I don't know. It just didn't happen for them. And then obviously when they come to the Portugal game, I think Portugal did an Italy on them. I think they did the dark arts on them, and ultimately we all know what happened there. And yeah, it was one of these tournaments that I feel got away for England, and I just think it was a campaign that was frustrating. I don't think, as you said, there was players carrying injuries, but I also thought there was a lot of players out of form for England as well at this tournament. As I said, I don't think Gary Neville had a brilliant tournament. I don't really think Frank Lampard played his best football in this tournament. I don't think Michael Owen was at his best. I felt he was really struggling in the tournament. I know Crouch got a goal in it, but yeah, it didn't quite happen for England. They were very disjointed in a lot of games, and ultimately they didn't get past a really well-drilled and, as I said, a masters of the dark arts in some respects, Portuguese side.
I think they made a big blunder playing Wayne Rooney up on his own, Charlie, and I think he was getting frustrated, and that's what ended up getting himself sent off against Portugal. It had nothing to do, no matter what they try and say, they try to say that the referee was doing nothing until Cristiano Ronaldo came over. No, that referee was taking his time. If Wayne Rooney doesn't stand on Carvalho's nuts, then there's no red card to be happening. It's as simple as that. But I don't think Sven helped him by playing him up front of his own when he was only just back from a pretty serious injury.
If anybody ever wants to understand why us Scots don't like the English, and we always point out the fact that it's the pundits that annoy us, watch the coverage at the end of that game and you'll see exactly why. They are adamant that they've been cheated, and it's clear as day they weren't.
To be fair to Hansen, I think he's the only one that says, really has given the referee a decision to make, and surprise, he's Scottish. So There we go. I miss Alan Hansen on Match of the Day.
Charlie, you sound a lot like Chris and Grant at this stage.
No, I was going to say, I don't know if Wayne Rooney was a one up top striker at that point in his career. I think, obviously he broke through a couple of years prior, so I think he probably needed someone up front with him. Not that I was complaining, because I was happy to see them go out, but I think obviously Wayne Rooney took a while to recover for that. I would say, he didn't get a goal in the World Cup until 2014, I think, after that. So I think it probably knocked his confidence a wee bit, and obviously England missed out on qualification for the next Euros after that. So, and 2010 they were really disappointing. So I do wonder if the confidence was not that I care. To be brutally honest, but I think it was probably Sven was trying to overcomplicate it, and probably could have been a wee bit less gung-ho.
That's a very good point, because I forgot just how much it sank for England after that. You're right, it was the Wally with the Burley in 2008, so they never even got there. They were rotting at 2010 and got hammered by that Germany 10. Yeah, spoiler alert. 2012 they lost to Italy and penalties, I guess that's all right. 2014 they went grouped, and in 2016 they lost to Iceland. It's not until the Neville years that they've finally kind of got back into that. Not Neville,
Yeah.
Southall.
Yeah.
Southgate.
Neville Southall.
I don't think Neville Southall would like you for that, Chris.
I wouldn't, no.
Just going back to that Portugal game, hands up if you knew that Owen Hargreaves scored the only penalty for England in the shootout against Portugal. I didn't know that.
Only because I looked it up earlier.
I did not. I wouldn't have got that. Lampard, Gerrard, and Carragher missed the penalties for England.
What I thought was weird, they brought on Carragher to take a penalty. He's one of the last people you think penalty taker. You know, Carragher, solid defender, could play anywhere at the back, but come on as a penalty taker. Were England that desperate at that point? I mean, they'd 17-year-old Theo Walcott on the bench who hadn't even kicked a ball in the Premier League by this point, who somehow made the squad, which was a wildcard selection. They didn't even use him.
Just before we move on, I mean, obviously looking at that Portugal team, I mean, they had some really decent players on that side. You know, the likes of Carvalho, as you mentioned there. Nuno Valente was a very underrated defender. Maniche in midfield, I thought him and Petit were very good. But of course, Figo was coming to the end of his career, but he was still very much in the mix at this point. And then you had guys like Pauletta, who I think were very underrated. Remember, Pauletta played for PSG for a period of time, and you know, this was the sort of tournament where guys like Nuno Gomes were still about. You know, he obviously was a bit of a scourge for England at Euro 2000, and Helder Postiga was still doing well, and obviously was playing regularly for Spurs in the Premier League. So Portugal had some decent players, and you know, they for me are a bit of a team that until obviously they won Euro 2016. They were always there or thereabouts, but they just didn't have that extra 5% to get over the line in the big games. But I thought this was a bit of an opportunity missed for them, because after beating England, they obviously got done by the French.
There's a good bulk of that Portuguese team were in the Porto team that won the UEFA Cup and Champions League back-to-back season.
Yes, exactly. That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. One of the teams who looked as though they were going to be in the running to win the tournament was Argentina. We'll obviously talk about some of the goals later, as I would imagine a couple of these Argentina goals will feature in their respective top threes. But you know, they won their group of death by beating Ivory Coast 2-1, which was a decent scoreline, I guess a decent side. Pumped Serbia Montenegro as well at that point 6-0. Drew with the Netherlands and meaningless game, and then beat Mexico in the next round. They came up against Germany, and even though Germany were hosts, it was still a German team that was in the early stages of their transition towards glory in 2014. But they made a couple of tactical blunders, Charlie, which is referenced very well in Tim and Mark's book.
Aye, that was that was probably the bit. I'm actually reading a book about Argentinian football just now. And I just got to this chapter, and the author was saying that I think they thought they'd won the tournament by this point. They thought, oh, we'll just rock up and we'll win every game, and it all ended up with egg in their face. And I think it was this. Did Messi get dropped for this game? Am I right, or did he?
No, he didn't actually start games, but I know it's referenced that they maybe should have brought him on, but they took off. Aye. I think they took off Crespo and put on another midfielder in there, and Germany put on a couple of attackers.
Right. Aye, the manager at the time just got it wrong, and that was it. I think they should have. I think the author in my book was saying that they should have just went for it, and they went far too naive, went defensive, thinking that the game was done, and lo and behold, it wasn't, and they're out.
My favourite start of that game was the fact that both Germany and Argentina were in it, having won 3 penalty shootouts at 3 before it in the World Cup. That was something had to give in that one. So Argentina lost their first ever penalty shootout in that game. Had Germany lost it, it would have been their first ever defeat on penalties.
Yeah. I don't think Germany have lost a penalty shootout yet.
You could be right. I can't think of one.
No, neither can I. I think the closest they got to defeat was when they played Italy in Euro 2016, which. But we're not covering the Euros. They win that anyway. But yeah, Germany also made it through, but they get beaten in the semi-final by the Italians, and the French got through at the final as well. And it was set up so Italy versus France. Of course, 2 of these teams are going to be playing Scotland, so guaranteed Scotland were going to play the World Cup winners. It was set up for Zinedine Zidane's glorious end to his career. He'd produced some magical performances against Spain the last 16. Played very well against Brazil in the quarterfinal. Scored the winner against Portugal in the semi-final. He scores the opening goal in this final with a Panenka type penalty, hits the bar and goes in. And then
A
lost the
fraction
head.
of an inch away from missing that penalty. It's
It
like
was.
only Zidane would get away with that one, I think.
Exactly. But he lost the head a wee bit.
He stuck ahead more. I mean, you've got to credit Materazzi for winding him up to get him to do it. Materazzi, another exponent of the dark arts, clearly. He'd been sent off. He got sent off
Scored
the
in the
Australia
final.
game, didn't he? And he'd already scored. He was equaliser in this game as well. So it was really a tale of those two men in this final. But yeah, it was. I forgot how late on in the game that happened. It was in my head that happened a lot earlier for some reason. So the two goals kind of happened early. Then the headbutt, and then it went all the way on the penalties. But actually, it was only 10 minutes before the end of extra time that headbutt happened. So yeah, it was. It wasn't as big a influence on the game overall, but there's still that. Zidane is retiring. This is the end of his career, and that's how he goes out.
Yeah, and you see him walking past the trophy that he should have collected. I don't know what most people's reaction would have been, but I think my reaction was, "Whoa, that just happened." It was like jaw-dropping material.
One of the things so I was going to come across there and just say this. One of the things I'll always remember is the commentary from John Motson. He just says, Zidane's career ends in disgrace. And, it was. It's just quite extraordinary. And, for him to do something like that, and obviously there's a lot of stories about how it's transpired. Materazzi says something about Zidane's mother or something. I think that's the main story. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's one of the stories, certainly. But, this was a game that people forget Materazzi actually scored for Italy in this game as well. So there was a bit of a kind of dial in between the pair of them in this match. But it was just such a remarkable game. It wasn't the most iconic of games, in my opinion. Obviously, the Zidane incident is the huge talking point, and obviously the penalty that Zidane clips in off the underside of the bar, which, Panenka penalties in Italy, well, we all know how that goes sometimes, and of course Pirlo knows more than most. But to do it against someone like Gigi Buffon, you have to have nerves of steel to do that, because Buffon, in my opinion, is one of the best goalkeepers of all time. But one thing I'll always remember from this match was I thought Italy, some of their kind of auxiliary players really kind of stepped up in the final when it went to the later the game went on. Guys like De Rossi, guys like Iaquinta coming on, Pirlo, obviously, as I mentioned, Luca Toni played a really thankless task in his own up front. I just thought the French, even before the red card, they were struggling to break teams down. It was a pretty tough night for a number of players. It was just one of those nights where it just didn't happen for the French. And then obviously we'll talk about the shootout, I'm sure. But yeah, it was a fascinating game, and obviously, a final. I remember watching this in Jersey. I was on holiday in Jersey, and I remember watching the final, and I think it was a fairly neutral crowd, and we weren't really sure who was batted for who to win. To be honest, I was just delighted it was a repeat of the Euro 2000 final, because I thought the Euro 2000 final was, for my opinion, one of the best finals of all time. Sadly, this didn't live up to that same expectations, but it still was dramatic nonetheless.
I was slightly disappointed. I thought the Germans were really great. It was disappointing that the host nation didn't make it to the final of their own tournament. To credit to the Germans, the third place match was brilliant. That was a great game of football between them and Portugal. And that's a bit of a theme. We'll come back to that. But yeah, I think the team that won were the team that deserved to win the tournament. I think Italy just played better across the board. As you say, France. I think France struggled to break teams down throughout the tournament. The only team that really actually scored a couple of goals against was Spain. Surprisingly, because Spain did what they
and they were a goal down in that game as well.
Yeah. Like David Villa giving them the lead for the penalty spot. And then they came back and won that 3-1. But that was typical Spain back then. Spain just turned up at tournaments as one of the favourites and blew it somewhere along the line. It felt like that's when they did that. But the stuffy 1-0 win against Brazil, the stuffy 1-0 win against Portugal, they got to the final, and it kind of just never really quite clicked for them. And the Italians, I think, deserved it. There was two brilliant games in this tournament for me in the knockout stages, and that Italy-Germany game was one of them.
Yeah, that end of that game was brilliant. Fabio Grosso, I felt, played such an important role in Italy winning it, because obviously he scores the first goal in the extra time against Germany. Obviously Del Piero seals the game, but for me, obviously, he scores the winner in the shootout as well. One thing I'll always remember from that shootout is the Italian penalties were so well taken. Fabian Barthez had absolutely no chance with any of those 5 penalties. Ironically, Materazzi scoring one of them. And I remember him when he was stepping up to take one, I thought, well, how's this going to end up? Because obviously Trezeguet missed after that. He was the only person who missed in this shootout. And I just think that Italian team, they had such a lot of experience in there. Del Piero, of course. They had some great players on that side. But yeah, it was a fantastic game. Well, not a fantastic game. It was a fantastic penalty shootout from Italy. But I think the French will feel disappointed. I remember the quarter-final they played Brazil when Henry scored, and I felt France were going to kick on from that because Brazil was still going quite well. Obviously, they were the defending champions from 2002. Brazil themselves had moments where they were good and they looked like they were going to be possibly the team to beat again. But when France did beat Brazil, it almost felt like they were going to take that control and sort of kind of go again, but it didn't quite happen for them in the final. And obviously, I agree with Krys. Italy deserved to win it. They were excellent against Ukraine in the quarters. They just squeaked past Australia on a penalty from Francesco Totti, of course. So a bit of a squeaky one there. Sorry, John, to bring that one up. But yeah, I mean, the Italians, I mean, this was at a peak where Italian football was in a really good place. You'd obviously had, Milan at the top of their game, Juventus at the top of their game in Serie A. You had obviously Roma as well going well still. And Serie A was still in a very exciting place, and it kind of showcased that really throughout this tournament.
Particularly in the courts.
Well, yeah, that's the second part of that. And I'm pretty sure there's a podcast about that James Richardson talks about, certainly.
Probably. I can't believe that's coming up to 20 years. Charlie, before we move on to the kits and goals, what was your memories of the final?
I just remember jumping out my seat when Zidane lamps him. It was amazing. Like, being so young, I was like, what the flip? It was so good. I mean, looking back on it now, 20 years later, I don't feel the same. I would like to put that on record, but I think as a young kid, like, you'd never seen anything like that before. Like, and then obviously when we come to 2010, there was another moment of madness in that final that was a bit violent as well. But that was the first time I'm like, what has he done? Like, never seen anything like that on a football pitch. But I think the commentary is right. Like, he ended his career in a bit of a disgrace. But I mean, he's probably had a reason to do it, as the story is. Materazzi slagging his mum or his whatever. But I would, if it was me, I wouldn't stick my head on him if someone had said that. But a bizarre end to a great tournament, I would say.
Mm-hmm. That's a good phrase to put it.
It's the Marty McFly ending. It's like somebody called him chicken and he's reacted.
That's a
good play, actually.
Good analogy, that. Right, so I sent you all the home kits of 2006, also see for 2010. What was your top? Are we going top 3, Charlie, or just our favourite one?
Oh, I only picked a top 1 for my kit.
That's fine. We'll stay with top 1 then. Yeah,
I've picked 3 favourite goals, if that helps.
Fine. Right. Well, my favourite kit, I think, from 2010 was for 2006. Sorry, I went with the Japan one. I thought the Japan one was really smart. I thought it was a real cracking kit.
Yeah, Japan's my honourable mention. I've actually gone for Italy. I thought the Italian top was lovely in this one. I had the Poland white one, which is unusual for me because usually I go with the red one. But in this case, I liked that white one. I had like a cool sort of Puma sort of grey effect in it, which actually was really nice. Made that just a slightly different from a plain white top. So, but yeah, Italy was the best one for me.
Yeah, a couple of standouts for me. I mean, again, I think it's a bit of a theme with the European nations. I mean, I quite like the Croatia kit. It was a bit classic. Kind of had 98 vibes about it. But Serbia and Montenegro's kit, I thought looked quite nice. Obviously, this is one of the I think it might have been the last tournament they played under the banner Serbia and Montenegro. So, it was quite nice. I mean, South Korea, obviously continued on in that manner as well. But yeah, I think I'd probably go with Croatia just for the classic element.
I've went for the Ghana one. I really like the star pattern on it. Most tournaments, the African nations have a really nice kit.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Ghana for me for the 2006 one, for definite.
And in terms of the top 3 goals, I'll kick off again. So in no particular order, I've went with Philip Lamb's goal in the opening game because I just thought that was a great way to kick off the tournament. I've put Cambiaso's goal against Serbia and Montenegro because, 22, 24 passes, whatever it was, and then a good finish at the end of it. I just thought it was great football. And a bit of a wild card win. I've put in Fabio Grosso's goal in the semi-final, just simple because of the timing of the game in the 119th minute to curl it in the way he did, and he's a left back as well. I thought it was an outstanding goal. So yeah, I'm going with those three. Grant, what's your three?
Right, I'm going to be very unpopular, so I'm going to get this out of the way. I've got to start with Joe Cole's goal against Sweden. I know that's going to end up with a few boos, but I just think that's an incredible technique, and off the underside of the bar. So that's one. I'm going to go back to that Germany opening game. I've got to pick that Torsten Frings strike. I think it's an absolutely superb strike. But my favourite goal by an absolute distance in this tournament has to be Maxi Rodriguez against Mexico, that extra time winner. It's the commentary from Steve Wilson that makes this goal, when he says, that is a fantastic goal by Maxi Rodriguez. And he has to say, what a hit, twice in two different tones. And like Lawrenson, I think, is alongside him in commentary, and I think they were just like in shock at that strike, because it's just an unbelievable technique, and it was a great strike, because Mexico were really frustrating Argentina in that game, and that for me is an absolute pillar strike. In my opinion, one of the best ever goals scored at a World Cup tournament.
And Charlie, what's your three?
Aye, so I asked my best mate ChatGPT to write these down for me, so I've got a list.
Insightful research.
I remembered the goals. I just asked them to take a note of them. So, and again, no particular order. I've went Cambiaso's. Just that is an incredible team goal. I just remembered. I think Crespo nutmegged the player, and then Cambiaso just side foots it in. Superb. One of the best goals I've ever seen. I have went for Philip Lam in the opening game as well, an absolute perler of a strike. And I've also went for Joe Cole's goal against Sweden. Just an absolutely amazing volley. I mean, thankfully it mattered for nothing because Henrik Larsson equalised. But aye, sometimes you've just got to appreciate a good goal for what it is.
Right, Chris, what's your three?
So I like everybody else, I went Cambiaso. It's a terrific team. You can't beat a wee back heel as well in there just before the end of it. So yeah, terrific team goal. It was just one of the best. I've also went Maxi Rodriguez against Mexico because I agree, Grant, that is an absolutely terrific goal. I put that ahead of the Joe Cole goal because it's more meaningful.
Yeah. So I was sorry, I should have put Cole third. My order was Cole third. And then obviously I had Rodriguez as the outstanding number one. But yeah, sorry, that was just
I haven't ordered them here, so
so I had in my mind. I feel really bad because that Cambiaso goal is a great goal, but I just love there's so many strikes from the edge of the box and outside the area. Maybe I don't appreciate the intricacy of the team play because that is a fantastic goal. I mean, the amount of passes involved with it is unbelievable. But sorry, Chris, I'll go back to you.
No, this was my problem. Is there's so many goals in this tournament from outside the box where I was almost actually saying, right, I'm not going to pick goals from outside the box. I'm going to look for something different. And yet we've still ended up with the same. I've mentioned Cambiaso and you guys have. You've mentioned Maxi Rodriguez. The one goal I picked out that none of you mentioned was from the same game as a Cambiaso goal, the Tevez goal, because I thought the individual skill to score that was terrific as well.
Yeah.
So that would be my three.
Yeah. I mean, another goal that's kind of underrated is that Gerrard goal against Trinidad and Tobago. He cuts inside and fires into the corner. But as I said, I felt that was a game that was very harsh on Trinidad and Tobago, so that's why I've not mentioned it. But until now, of course. But yeah,
right, I know that you're best mates with Guy Mowbray these days, but do you need to keep bringing up the England goals?
That wasn't actually him on commentary for that one. It was.
I know it wasn't. Sorry, I couldn't resist that.
No, you couldn't resist that.
Just to go back to a point you made earlier, John, Euro 2008 followed this, and the qualification draw had already been done before the World Cup came along, and we got stuffed by that. As you mentioned, not only did we get the two finalists, we got one of the quarterfinalists as well. Given that the quarterfinals also had Argentina and Brazil in it, that's like half the teams we could have got. And we still managed to do pretty well in that tournament. We never made that, but I mean, to finish third in that group when there's three of the teams given the quarterfinals World Cup is actually pretty good going.
We're very unlucky, and that because of that Euro 2008 qualifying campaign, people thought, oh well, we've got a good chance of qualifying for the World Cup. But unfortunately, the qualification campaign can just be summed in BIB, Burley, Iwelumo, Boozegate. Just an absolute disaster. I mean, I thought George Burley was going to be a good manager, but for me, he will go down as Scotland's worst ever men's national team manager for the simple reason that Berti Vogts had to rebuild a squad from Craig Brown. I mean, Craig Brown left the nation's team. Not much that Craig Brown could have done. There wasn't much coming through. George Burley took over a team that was doing well, had great team spirit, great momentum, and he totally messed up. They were an absolute joke. And obviously, you've got the Iwelumo miss, which Charlie, I might as well let you have the opportunity to have a wee dig at the commentator, you and Cameron from Real Radio back then.
I remember back in the day, we played on Saturdays for the national team. Back in those days, remember those days? I remember, this is a memory I've got still nearly 20 years later. Me and my dad used to listen to the games on the radio in the kitchen. And that was like Hibs games, Scotland games, just whatever was on the radio, we'd be in the kitchen listening. He'd have a pint of beer, I'd have a can of Diet Coke or whatever. I remember you and Cameron going, "Oh, he scored! Hey, Krys and Charlie," or whatever his name is. And then he's about gave Alan Ruff a heart attack where he's like, "Oh, he's missed!" And I can just imagine him grabbing him and shaking him. That sums up you and Cameron to me. Getting excited before it's even came true. I'm not going to mention what he's like on the radio just now, with one of his club teams being top of the league. But that was funny. I remember because it sounded like he'd scored for about 2 minutes. Oh, brilliant, we're 1-0 up, and then Ruffy's like, "No, he's missed."
What a clown.
The boy from Coatbridge has scored. I was at that game. That is the worst miss I've saw live. It's just one of these ones.
I don't know what's worse, Cameron's commentary or being for Coatbridge. No offence to anyone for Coatbridge.
Can I come in here, Charlie? Because like you, I can't stand you and Cameron. I never have and I never will. So that's something we definitely agree on.
Yeah, it was just a horrible day. That one against Norway, and
was that the same day Ferguson and McGregor done the?
No, and I'm just coming on to that because that happened. Believe it or not, April Fools. That all happened. Scotland. In fact, I remember a certain newspaper who will not name put out a story saying Kerry Katona to sing the Iceland national anthem because she was the face of Iceland at that point for the TV adverts. And there was one of my mates says, "You see this story?" I was like, "Look at the day at the top of the paper, mate." But yeah, it was just silly. But Boozegate, where'd you start with that? I mean, so basically, for context, Barry Ferguson and Al McGregor were drinking beyond the way they should have been after the 3-0 defeat against the Netherlands. George Burley was ready to send them home. Backtracked on it because a couple of players in the squad challenged them and said that they would walk as well. And instead of being a proper manager and saying, "Right, look, don't let you that door hit your arse on the way out," he called them back in, put them on the bench, and then, to be fair to Barry Ferguson, every time he talks about this, he owns up and says, "There's no excuse. The behaviour's ridiculous, but to do the V signs, etc., like kids in a playground, it was pretty pathetic." And although I think the lifetime ban was harsh because the SFA wanted to see be doing more than what Rangers did, and it was just a disaster from start to finish.
This was a disastrous tournament for Scotland out of this campaign. I mean, it all started with that horrific game in Macedonia and Skopje, that opening game where we lost a goal the first 5 minutes, and I don't think we ever really recovered, did we? I mean, maybe Krys will agree with me on this in particular, but I mean, obviously that Norway game is highly referenced, but I mean, it was just a disaster, wasn't it? I mean, that Norway game, I mean, 4-0. I mean, we were lucky it was just 4. It's comfortably up there as one of my smelliest games watching Scotland. It's really, really bad. I mean, we finished with a win against Macedonia, and obviously that battling display against Netherlands when we lost 1-0. Eliaya getting the winner in the last 10 minutes. But yeah, it was a tournament to forget, a qualification campaign to forget, and yeah, it was just, quite frankly, an embarrassment at times.
there's nothing good to remember about it at all. Every memory we've got of it is the just embarrassing things. Actually, the thing that sums it up best for me is all the runners up made the playoff except one, and it was Norway. That's how bad they were, and they pumped us 4-0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were awful that night. Absolutely awful that night.
Yeah, that was for the Caldwell brothers at centre half. Let's just park that right there right now. But there were some SPL players that went to this World Cup. So you had Georgios Samaras of Celtic and Greece, Keisha Young, Celtic in his career. Didn't realise he was at Celtic by this point. Maggi Bagheera for Algerian Rangers, DeMarcus Beasley and Morsedu, both of American Rangers, of course. Landry Nguemo, sadly no longer with us, playing for Cameroon. He was alone at Celtic that season. Michael McGlinchey for New Zealand. Motherwell. Dusan Pernis was in the Slovakia squad. Another man no longer with another man no longer with is Sol Bamba of Cote d'Ivoire. He was playing with Hibs at the time. And I have to mention this guy's name. Edson Braafheid, Netherlands and Celtic. And what astounded me is that he came on in the World Cup final. How did he make that squad?
I have no idea. He was a dreadful defender for us in a dreadful season, and somehow managed to make the Netherlands squad and came on in the final. And see, when he came off the bench, everybody I was watching it was like, really?
Aberdeen fans think he's a hero.
Was that from the 4-each game?
The 4-each game.
That was the highlight of our season.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh dear.
Actually, hang on. See if we're going to talk about the 2010 World Cup. We need this.
Can't hear it, Chris.
That joke fell flat on its face then. Not the same with the Vuvuzelas, is it? Well, just do it myself. Just do that for the next 20 minutes.
Well, maybe edit this and put the Vuvuzela in it, but that's if I can be bothered. But yeah, the Vuvuzela probably sum up this World Cup, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I always go on record and say South Africa 2010 is the worst World Cup that's just a personal opinion. If you want to disagree, fine. But for me, it was the worst World Cup in terms. I said a lot of the games were poor. A lot of big players didn't turn up, but the Vuvuzelas just encapsulated that atmosphere because they were annoying, and I'm so glad that was one culture that didn't come out of Africa.
Yeah, it was one of these. It was one of these tournaments that I think the colour was quite good. That opening game probably lives long in the memory for Africa as a continent, and I think that culturally is huge for this World Cup and culturally superb for the global game. Maybe we'll talk about that opening game in a moment, but that's probably my recollection of it. I mean, obviously the Vuvuzelas is big as well. One thing I will absolutely agree with John is that I do think a lot of big players didn't hit the heights that they probably should have done. Part of it probably down to the conditions. Obviously, some of the pitches in South Africa, were maybe not of high quality, I would say. I don't really think some of them were particularly great. Probably the nature of the beast when you go to a continent like Africa, like FIFA did for the first time. But it was. I thought the colour brought something to it. But yeah, I think it was a sounds and sensory tournament. It was a senses tournament. That's how I would describe it.
It was audio overload.
Yeah, and definitely.
I would agree with that. No, I think the colour was what made it, and I'd definitely taken it to Africa was a big thing. Obviously Morocco had bidded for every single World Cup before it, still never got it, but South Africa did a good job. The Vuvuzela thing is their thing, and it's no for me, but it's certainly stuck as a memory with this World Cup. So
it goes back to my point of the fact that 2006 was the tournament that African nations were starting to turn the wheel a little bit and joining the global stage. 2010, they were the global stage.
Yeah. And you certainly got the lift off opening goal in that tournament, Charlie. Again, we remember Grant quotes commentators quite a lot, and I'll do it here, but Peter Drury on Shabalala's goal, Bafana. It's just an iconic link that sticks to this day, and it was a great strike, to be fair. And you just hope that the tournament would kick on from there.
I have a funny feeling that goal might feature later on if you pick up what I'm putting down. But no, it was such a great goal, such a great start. I think just like you saw the crowd when Shabalala scored, like that was for me. I remember watching most of those games at lunchtime at high school. My school had a TV in the dining hall that had like school information on, and I remember we hijacked it every lunchtime. We put the football on. It was class. We'd all crowd around the telly and watch it. But that game was a Friday, if I remember rightly, and I remember sitting in front of the TV watching it and just, what a way to start the World Cup. Wasn't it the best of games, but that goal was incredible. Just that kick started it, and there was a few cracking goals after that.
Mm-hmm. Just when you're talking about TVs there, Charlie, so in our work, they let us have TVs to watch the game, but our each team in our work were asked to decorate their desks, and it was the luck of the draw. So if you had France, people would bring in like the baguettes and etc.
They brought their lunch with them.
I put up the Eiffel Tower and all this kind of. You went to bring in some food if it was associated as well. That was part of it. My team got North Korea. So the only thing I could think of was put up a bunch of TVs with big reds through it saying World Cup free zone. That was the theme of our desk.
Did they not win it, actually?
I was going to say, did they not win that World Cup?
I watched a video on this earlier, right? Apparently that's all fake news. I've coined that phrase, yuck, I need a shower. It's apparently all that's nonsense. Like there's suggestions that during the Portugal game they turned it off after an hour and stopped feeding it. And some people in North Korea think Portugal won the World Cup because of that.
Yeah,
but not everybody believes that. Most of them like football. They know what happened. It's not as blackout as you think.
Yeah, but they weren't going to show any live football at all. It was only when they gave a commendable performance against Brazil in their opening game that King Johnny Oles decided, all right, we'll put it on. We'll put it on live, see how good this team is. Pumped 7-0. And their fans were not fans, North Korean fans. They were Chinese actors showing up with Chinese flags and stuff. Yeah, it was very weird. But if you thought they were bad, let's speak about France. That was a team that massively imploded. I think the image of that tournament for me is Patrice Evra picking up his lanyard and throwing it away in disgust after an altercation with the fitness coach.
Are France angry about FIFA? What about the team they knocked out in the playoff?
We're world's smallest violin alert.
Yeah.
My recollections of France in this tournament was that Raymond Domenech was an absolute disaster, and obviously coming off the back of 2006, where France, were in the final. I mean, this was just an absolute disaster for them. I mean, they finished rock bottom, of this group, and obviously they couldn't even beat South Africa in the last game. South Africa got their win. Obviously we talked a little bit about the opening game, but France were just terrible in this tournament. I mean, their first game against Uruguay, I remember, was an absolutely dreadful game of football. It was absolutely shocking. And even Uruguay felt a bit of sympathy for them by going down to 10 men in the last 10 minutes. Mexico stroked them off the park. Blanco, who's one of my favourite players from Mexico, got a goal in the game. I think there's just the sort of making of Chicharito Hernandez as well at this tournament as well. But France were just absolutely abysmal. Just want to go back to that opening game just briefly. I actually have vivid memories of that opening game because I was in my bed. I felt absolutely dreadful that day, and I won't spare you the details of why I was in my bed, but I was in my bed watching the game, and I couldn't watch the game. I was falling asleep. I woke up, it was 1-1. I actually missed the two best passes of play in the game, which was the two goals. Of course, Rui Marquez scored for Mexico after that wonderful Shabalala goal. But yeah, my World Cup in 2010 did not get off to a good start, but it did get better.
You get better than the French.
No, well, you're better than the French, yeah. Raymond Domenech always reminded me of Martin O'Neill if you got him off Wish. That's what
I mean, he got France the World Cup. When I say he got France, Zidane carried them.
100%.
In that 2006 tournament. And
Yeah,
obviously
Rory carried the ball in the next time.
and of course, Scotland didn't beat him. According to him, it was the ball boys. Yeah,
Oh, aye, that was it.
didn't go there. But aye, that was just implosions of epic proportions. But England weren't much better, Charlie. I mean, remember that headline from a certain newspaper? Easy. England, Algeria, Slovenia, Yanks. And, well, they scraped through this group. Capello had... That's the thing about Theo Walcott. So Theo Walcott scores a hat-trick against Croatia in qualifying and doesn't make this tournament. Yeah. So he missed out in the tournament he should have been there for, and he makes the tournament that he should be nowhere near the playing for. Because they picked Sean Wright-Phillips, who was on the decline by then, and they were just absolutely terrible, England, in that group stage. And I remember the last 16 against Germany, because we had a charity football tournament at Lesser Hampden. That's now the City Stadium at Queen's Park. Well, stadium, use that word loosely. And yeah, I think most teams just decided to get themselves beat early so that they could go watch the Germany game. It was happening at 3 o'clock.
England, they've always got this arrogance about them going into a tournament. It'll be the same this summer, but that one I remember especially, like, they've won it. They just need to turn up, and they were dreadful in that group stage. Absolutely dreadful. And then obviously they got tanked off Germany, albeit they probably should have got a goal when Frank Lampard scored. Well, I mean, he didn't score, did he? But no. It's about 6 miles over the line. But that was another tournament that England should be getting to the latter stages in most tournaments, I would say, with the type of players they have, especially back then. Like Gerrard was in his peak, Lampard was in his peak. You know, I can't remember who else was in that squad in midfield forward, but they had a really good team. And again, it's like they're a good group of individuals, but they're not a team. And I think that's something that, as Krys said, in latter World Cups and Euros, they've actually got right. And, you know, obviously they've got to semis and finals, thankfully not won it. But back in that 2010 World Cup, they were just a group of individuals, thankfully.
Yeah.
One thing I'll always remember from this tournament with England is United States won this group, and that's how poor England were. That opening game that they had, obviously Gerrard gets them up and running with a goal inside the first 5 minutes. You're thinking, oh, well, here we go, England might be in a bit of business. And then that Rob Green error, I mean, that's a shocker. I mean, that is an absolute stinker.
The pub I was at didn't know whether to laugh or cheer.
Yeah, it was an absolute shocker. But the one quote that I'll always remember, there's 2 quotes, but the one big quote I'll always remember is Wayne Rooney going up to a camera and saying, "Nice to see your own fans boo you after the Algeria 0-0. They were rank rotten that night against Algeria. And let's be honest, they were very fortunate to squeeze past Slovenia. Jermaine Defoe getting that goal to take England through, because Slovenia were working away in the group. They had 4 points in the first 2 games, and England were under a lot of pressure getting into that game, and they managed to squeak through. But that England game against Germany, I mean, we've already referenced him in the podcast, Guy Mowbray. You know, I spoke to Guy for my own podcast back in the day about this, and obviously I met Guy and talked to him about this in principle. Let's be honest, even if Lampard's goal did count and it went 2-2, I think Germany would have gone on and won the game anyway. They were by far the better team. England were all over the place in this game. You know, David James was beaten 4 times this game. It could and probably should have been more. I know England hit the bar in the second half with that free kick from Lampard. Lampard was England's best player in that game. But Matthew Upson also did get the only bright light for England in the match. But in the last sort of 25 minutes of that game, Germany schooled them. Thomas Müller showing his absolute class. Podolski and Klose, unbelievable players. England's defending was abysmal, summed up by that close opening goal. Just a long kick from Manuel Neuer, and I think Mark Lawrenson says it in commentary, it's defending you'd see it in a Sunday League game, and he was absolutely right. I mean, and obviously the famous line he uses is the technology, thanks very much, Sepp Blatter, but let's be honest with yourself, Lawrenson. England were well beaten in this tournament, and Capello, Fabio Capello, obviously a fantastic manager at club level, but he just did not get this right with England at all.
Yeah, you're right. This is when VAR really started, effectively, because just before this tournament, we were told we weren't getting it. There was no need for it and all that. But we'd already had the on-V handball, which that would go with the ruled out with VAR. That's for certain.
100%.
This goal would have stood with VAR correctly. Having said that, it would have stood with goal line technology as well. And we got goal line technology at World Cups, and we've moved away from it, which bugs the hell at me because goal line technology is faster and it's more accurate. The other one that was in the last 16 of this tournament as well was Argentina scoring. Like when Tevez is miles offside. Like he's clearly offside. There's maybe one of the two defenders might be closer to goal line than him, but certainly not both of them. And it's certainly he's miles behind the goalkeeper. So that goal shouldn't have stood either. So that's 3 incidents we're talking about within the space of like about 9 months that were all huge, big things on the screen. So that's why we've got to the point. But yeah, like this is where VAR had to come in because there was no argument against it anymore. And I think that was right. But I think you're right. Germany blew England away that day. It is right to say that goals change games, and if that had stood and it had been to each, it might have been different. I just think Germany would up again because they'd kind of take their foot off the gas a bit.
100%.
I was really fortunate because the stars aligned for this tournament for me. Because, well, I say the stars aligned. The volcano erupted. Remember the volcano?
Yes, Iwelumo. Yes.
I was meant to go to New York in April, and I had to cancel that. And then I got my refund and I rebooked to go to the Celtic convention in San Francisco in this summer. I was in America when England played them. I sat in a bar in San Francisco and I high-fived my American mate when that goal went in for the Rob Green mistake. It was absolutely brilliant. It was weird. The really weird thing was there was games on while I was eating my breakfast because of the time difference. There was games being played before I get out of my bed. I'm going to have the opposite problem in this bloody World Cup, unfortunately. I'm going to have to get up to watch us, you know.
Yeah, it doesn't sound thrilling, does it? But it's, the other thing about that Argentina goal that you mentioned is that they made a big mistake in the stadium because they showed the goal.
Oh, yeah, I forgot they showed it. Yeah.
On the big screen, which they're not supposed to do. So they showed the replay, and the referee looked up at that and they were like, "Teacher, we've made a mistake here, but we can't go by it because the technology's not bad at it."
Do you know the one thing that goes against me, all the whinging that England did about this? The fact it was Germany of all teams. So, look across the line. Yeah. Well, get it up, because 60 years ago for now. You've been gaslighting us for years about how your goal, the third goal in the World Cup final end went over the line. We've seen evidence of it hitting the bar, coming down the line and getting it. We know it never went in. And you still get insisted it did. Oh, it's inconclusive. No, it's not. It's absolutely conclusive. It never crossed the line. So, away with your tish, gun.
Well, Krys has climbed right on top of the high horse there. Charlie, another team who were absolutely dreadful in this World Cup, and they were the holders, were Italy. They were given. I mean, there was a period where holders didn't do very well from 2002 to 2018, but every holder apart from one went out in the first round. Italy were one of those, but they had a pretty easy group: Paraguay, New Zealand, and Slovakia. And New Zealand were the only unbeaten team in this whole World Cup with 3 draws.
Aye, that's funny, isn't it? I remember when we were chatting to Mark and Tim about that. We were saying about the news. Normally, if you didn't lose a game in the World Cup, you win it. But New Zealand drew 3 of theirs, and that was that. But Italy were another. I don't know what it was about France and Italy and England. That maybe it was the altitude and what have you. I don't think the teams you sort of expected to do well were really, really poor. And that was. I would tend to agree with you, John. I think the 2010 World Cup is probably lower on my list of favourite ones, just purely based on the real lack of quality, I would say, in most, if not all, the games. Maybe minus Brazil, North Korea with getting 7 goals, but that, again, it's not really much to shout about, is it? But Italy were poor. Just a really dreadful tournament for them.
The Jubilani ball didn't help.
That's true.
Unless, I think anyone German was good with it because they were sponsored by Adidas and they got access to the ball long before it actually made that World Cup. So that probably helped them.
I mean, now we've mentioned that I went out in the group stage here. It's remarkable to think that World Cup final we talked about 20 minutes ago is the last time they played a knockout game.
Unbelievable.
20 years ago.
Aye. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've always been the Euros and stuff like that. I mean, when they won Euro 2020, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, not in the World Cup.
But go back to briefly Germany and bringing in Ghana here. So there was a game between Ghana and Germany that was famous for what reason? See if you can come up with it.
Was that the brothers?
Correct, Charlie. The Boateng brothers playing
That's
against
right.
each other. This had never happened. And so you had Jerome Boateng, the German defender, and Kevin Prince Boateng, the attacker in the Ghana team. But what makes this even more fascinating is that Kevin Prince Boateng injured Michael Ballack in the FA Cup final, and it ruled Ballack out the tournament. Probably did Germany a favour, to be fair, because Ballack wasn't great at that point.
That's an incredible answer. That I forgot about.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's always a potential for it happening one day. They might have the Fletcher brothers.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened, but because you've got Dan Fletcher, Scotland, former Scotland captain. He's married an Irish woman, and one of the kids is playing for England. That's bad parenting. Yeah, only kidding, Dan, obviously. But going back to Ghana, obviously it looks as though they could be the first African team into the semi-final. Now, obviously, this brings up the controversial game with Uruguay, the Suarez handball, etc. I don't blame Suarez for doing it. It's desperation to try and keep his team in it. But we're not talking about anything if Asamoah Gyan doesn't hit his penalty off the bar and over. He then scores in the shootout. What I didn't like about what Suarez was the getting carries on shoulders as if he was some sort of hero. That was just distasteful. That's where he was like, just have a wee bit of humility, but lapping it up, that was poor.
He also celebrated in the tunnel when Gian smashed his penalty against the bar.
I think that's okay. I think it's okay if he celebrates.
See,
that means his gamble has paid off.
I get it. I don't agree with it. I think it's poor professionalism of sportsmanship, but I do get it. But I don't. I understand it, but I'm not a fan. But what I will say is Ghana should have won the game. They missed that penalty, and it was so harsh on them. They played really well. I thought Uruguay were excellent in the tournament as well, by the way. And this was actually a very iconic game in the knockout phase, and I thought it was actually a match between two teams in the quarterfinal that was really, really good in the tournament. Obviously the talk is about Suarez and Forlan, but they had some brilliant players in that Uruguay team, and obviously they had a great run to the semis, and they had that iconic game with the Netherlands in the third place playoff, which was very impressive as well. But Ghana, for me, were really coming into their own in the tournament. Also, they had that good win against the United States in the previous round, winning in extra time. So yeah, it felt so emotionally sad that Ghana didn't win this game because it meant so much for Africa. And I think that's why emotionally I feel really angry about it still to this day. But I go back to what John said right at the top. Suarez was acting on instinct, and he was saving his team because the goalkeeper was never getting it, and ultimately he ended up being a hero in many ways. But yeah, I do agree with the antics of it, but yeah. If we were in the same position, would we do the same? Of course we would.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one of these moments where you almost think the goal should just be given anyway.
Yes.
If it was like rugby and you got a penalty try because it was going to be a try until you did something, you still get the points for it anyway. This is the equivalent of that, and we don't do it in football. So you would almost just wish there was a rule change going. If you've done that, it's just a goal anyway.
Yeah.
However, it didn't happen. They missed the penalty, so it becomes a good gamble by Suarez. He's then suspended for the semi-final, and that's where it doesn't pay off. Because he's missing for that and he can't make the difference. So there's maybe an argument for saying it was a short-term gain but a long-term loss. Yeah. But if the goal goes in, maybe they don't even make the semi-final anyway. So that's your argument. It reminds me of a couple of years previous when Carlos Cuellar punches the ball off the line in the Celtic game.
Yes.
For the Nakamura shot, and then Celtic missed that penalty. But Jan Vennegoor gets a late one up anyway, and then Celtic go on and win the league. If Celtic don't win that game, Rangers win the league. So it was almost a gamble that was paid off for Carlos Cuellar.
Well, there's James McFadden tried that gamble as well in a game against Norway, but it didn't work out because Everson scored the penalty in 2003.
That's the opposite side of it. Yeah, you take the gamble, you take what happens, and then if the keeper saves it and pulls it out of the bag for you, then you've cracked it. But if the penalty is done, then you've gambled and lost.
And I can't remember what I was going to ask you there, Charlie. But yeah, in terms of the whole, we spoke to Tim Vickery about this, and he's got his being his bonnet about the coverage, the bias towards Africa in that tournament for that game.
Aye. I mean, I'm not sure what he's expecting with the tournament being in Africa, but hey ho. Do you remember I asked him about the controversy with Suarez, and he was like, "Nope, you're wrong." I was like, "Oh, okay." But when he explained it, I understood why he said I was wrong. Still didn't agree with it, but hey ho. But no, I think, I mean, Suarez is doing what anyone would do to save their club or their country. Like, if the ball's going in and you're the last one on the line, you're probably going to try and save it any way possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it worked out fine because they got through, but did it work out fine because he was then suspended in the next game, and they probably could have done well in that game? But I mean, he's probably just doing what anyone would do, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just one of these things. But Uruguay did take part in a good semi-final against the Dutch, lost 3-2. But the Dutch, which then brings us on to the most brutal final of all time. So England were cheering because Howard Webb was in the final. So Howard Webb was getting cheered for the first time ever, other than Manchester United fans.
Not for very long, given how he performed in that final, because he ruined it.
Yeah. To be fair, it wasn't just him. He ruined it with there was one big decision he gets absolutely spectacularly wrong.
I think if he gets that spectacularly right, the final isn't as bad as it ended up being.
Possibly, yeah.
That was quite early on in the game.
Yeah. So I think this final had 14 yellow cards, including a double booking for Johnny Heitinger, who gets sent off in extra time. But the big one was the Nigel de Jong kung fu kick into the chest of Xavi Alonso, yellow card. Graham Poll tried to give an excuse that Howard Webb didn't see that chance. Well, he must have seen it because he's given a free kick. Has he noticed the severity of it? We don't know.
The question there then for Graham Poll is, does he think it's worth 3 yellow cards?
I think that would have been worth 3 red cards that instant.
It's just assault. I can't believe he doesn't see that.
Yeah.
And again, it's another one VAR would have corrected.
See if Nigel de Jong did that in the street, Howard Webb as a policeman would have arrested him and put him in the jail.
Exactly.
Yeah. This was an awful final. This was really, really poor. I mean, 14 yellows in the game. I mean, it was just all about that, really, to be honest. And up until extra time, probably the Dutch were the slight favourites. They had maybe the slightly better chances. I think Wesley Sneijder had a great chance that Casillas made a big save. I think Ramos had a chance, towards the end of the game. But it's a good goal from Iniesta that wins the final. It's a really nice finish. But this was not one that will live long in the memory. It's not a game that I remember, certainly. The two semi-finals lead up to the final, however, were both very big games, especially that Uruguay-Netherlands semi-final, because that was a cracking contest, because the Dutch really put in their best performance of the tournament, I felt, in this game. Obviously, Van Bronckhorst scores a worldie of a goal. Sneijder was excellent in the tournament. Robin still had his moments. And Uruguay obviously had their moments as well, because Forlan was still nipping in with goals. But that Germany-Spain semi-final, I think, is a very underrated game, because this was two heavyweight teams going head-to-head, and big Puyol, who I have such a lot of time for, great defender, very underrated defender, I feel, at the top of the game, and scores a header from a corner, which wins Spain the game. And Germany were going under the radar in the tournament because they obviously come off the back of that brilliant win over Argentina in the quarters. Spain had that battling win over Paraguay, who were really the kind of underdogs in the tournament. They were really causing a few surprises. But yeah, I mean, that two semi-finals were far better than the final itself, I have to say. And of course, the third place playoff was just as entertaining as I'm sure Krys has talked about in the past as well. So yeah, the final was a damn squib, unfortunately. But of course, Howard Webb will always have this game to look back on. Maybe not how we would have liked it, though.
I think the takeaway for us is Germany need to host all the tournaments. Germany need playing on third place matches as well, because they give good games in. They're the only ones that care about third place matches, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm glad they weren't in the 1991 though, just to clarify that.
Yeah, and we're going to obviously slag off Howard Webb. He'd actually had a decent tournament before the final, but how many refs does Scotland have at these two combined World Cups?
None.
0. I actually thought Craig Thompson was listed at one point, but no, he's not there.
The last time Scotland had a referee at any World Cup whatsoever was 2002 when Hugh Dallas was the fourth official under Pierre Luigi Collina. We haven't had one there since. Answers on a postcard, will I call them? What you up to? What's the problem here? When's that one going to get asked in the VAR review monthly videos? Or are we just going to softball them every time?
Here's the thing about Spain's route to the final. 1-0 last 16, 1-0 quarter-final, 1-0 semi-final, 1-0 the final. The only game they lost in the tournament was the opening game. Quite a run they had.
They were the first team to win the tournament, having lost the opening game as well.
Yeah. Gelson right. Fernandes with the winner in that game for Switzerland.
And Switzerland still didn't make it.
I know, quite unbelievable. Chile were a very dangerous team, so Spain beating them was a good result in that last game, because the Chileans were very dangerous in the tournament. Obviously beat Switzerland and Honduras. So yeah,
that set Chile up nicely for the World Cup afterwards.
Yes,
they had a really good 2014. They were my dark horses for that tournament, and they had a really good tournament. But you're right, Grant. That 2010 Chile team was really good as well.
I think one of my favourite goals was actually that quarter-final goal. It's not on my list of top three. It was just stupidly scored because Pedro hits the post. It comes back to David Villa, who then hits both posts before it goes over the line.
That's right. I remember that goal. That's a very, very strange goal. But Spain just found a way to get through it. And they were kind of like the Italy of that sort of period, because Spain were just so good at this time. They obviously won 2008. They won the World Cup 2010. They were then going to win 2012. This was the glory generation of Spanish international football. They were a joy to watch, but they also found ways to dig it out as well. And this is exactly how they did it in that closer stage of that tournament. And they weren't the greatest to watch. I love watching Spain, but they managed to find a way through in this. Brilliant.
I remember Spain being better to watch at the two Euros either side. The World Cup, they were shit to watch. I had a Spain top this World Cup as well, so I was supporting them all the way, and I was definitely supporting them in the final, especially after the way the final went and the Dutch and the Kung Fu kicks and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but like Spain could be a good team to watch, but I think that you've nailed it in the head there. The crucial difference between this Spain side and previous Spain sides is they could knuckle down and grind out the result when they needed it, instead of making an arse of it like they had in the previous tournaments.
They beat Carlos Puyol in defence as well, which held them together well. Yeah, he was
unbelievable
defender. Half.
They didn't concede a goal in the knockouts. That says all.
Yeah. And guess who Scotland would play in the forthcoming Euros? Yeah. World Cup winners, and that again would happen in 2014. So,
and we ran them close.
We did.
Just after that stupid game against Liechtenstein, we then played Spain. And then we ran them close because we came for 2-0, didn't we? We'll two each. And then Llorente came off the bench and got the winner. Yeah. But it was a good game.
Very good game.
The highlight of Craig Levine's tenure, but let's not go there.
You were talking about bad Scotland managers. He still somehow. I mean, Craig Levine will live on as being not as bad as George Burley, according to this podcast. Yep, and I would tend to agree.
No, a good accolade to get though when you're.
It's really not.
That is just standing on the epitome of shit. But let's continue.
So on to the tops here. What was your personal favourites? Chris, I've got a funny feeling you're going to say Spain since you had the top.
In terms of the tops, I think the 2006 tops overall were better than the 2010 tops.
100% agree.
There is one exception for that, and it's the Dutch top. The Dutch top was better in 2010 than it was in 2006. So I'll give them credit. But yeah, I had the Spain one. Again, Japan's is decent. It's not as good as our 2006 top. Serbia's was a big plus though.
Hey.
Yeah,
that joke's it for Aaron.
Along with the Swiss.
Look it up.
Right, I'm going to pick this up because my mate brought me back from a trip. He went to South Africa a couple of months previous to see family. He brought me a South Africa top, so I'm going to put that one down just for that alone. Although I'm not a yellow kit person, but that one was quite nice. Charlie, what about you?
I've picked two for this one. So I've went Australia for number one. I just really like it. The green top half and then the wee white border, and it goes into the yellow. Really smart. But I've also went for the Slovenia one. I think I don't know, the wee zigzaggy pattern on the top's quite nice. And it's obviously, is that green? Aye, it's green. So green and white top for me is all right.
I didn't go for that because I preferred the away top.
Yeah. It looks kind of like Werder Bremen a wee bit.
I'm big fan of that sort of unique top. Like no one else in the tournament had a top like that. So yeah, go for those two.
They
Grant, what was yours?
They infuriated me the whole tournament, but I did like Uruguay's shirt. That's the one that will always be vivid for me, is that Uruguay strip, because when I see that strip, I just immediately think Suarez and Forlan at that tournament. The only thing that was good about the French in the tournament was actually their kit was actually okay. Brought back memories of Euro 2000 for me a little bit. A bit of classic there. The Italian shirt was okay, but Uruguay's is the standout for me.
France should go back to Adidas. They just don't suit Nike. Adidas is.
I agree.
But
I agree, but I don't think that shirt is the worst one. But yeah, Uruguay is the one I choose.
Am I right in saying Germany are moving away from Adidas?
Yeah, tonight
they are.
That's like a sign of the apocalypse.
I know. It's just not right. In terms of goals, so I'll just kick off. So I've gone with Shabalala. Great goal in the opening game. I think Van Bronckhorst in the semi-final against Uruguay. I put that in because that was just an outstanding strike. I've also gone, as an outsider, Honda of Japan with a free kick against Denmark. There was two great free kicks in this game from the Japanese in this match, and Honda's was the first one, motored into the bottom corner. Charlie, what did Google Gemini tell you?
This one I didn't have to ask because I as soon as you said it, I was like, I remember 3 goals that I loved. Shabalala for definite. Van Bronckhorst as well, John. I agree with you. Third one was Mykon's against North Korea. Do you remember that? It was like on the touchline. Like
outside
what an
his
incredible
foot.
goal! Just incredible. And that's that. I like to rewatch that goal now and again. One of my favourite goals ever scored in football, to be honest with you. So, those 3. As I say, really good tournament for goals, I would say. And it kept getting better as they went on. So, those 3 for me.
Excellent. And Chris, what's your top 3?
I mean, I've got Mike on against Korea as well, so I totally agree with Charlie on that one. I have just the word thunder bastard for Van Bronckhorst against Uruguay. It is a stunning goal from a terrific player. Celtic fan, I hold my hand up. Gio Van Bronckhorst was a terrific player. And to see him do that at the World Cup was just beautiful. And my other one, and I don't think anybody's going to go for this, because it was Quagliarella against Slovakia. With a beautiful little dink. It's Legend. Just the skill to do that. It was just top notch. I loved watching that earlier on.
I love that. Quagliarella was a bit of a legend in Italy, that's for sure. I know Richardson loves talking about him, certainly. So you're going to ask my 3, aren't you? I think quite a lot of them have been mentioned. I mean, that Shabalala goal is iconic, so that one has to be in there. The Van Bronckhorst one has to be in there. And I would have probably picked Mykon's as well. I mean, I was going to say Clint Dempsey's against England, but
I really enjoyed that one. I must have.
I mean, that's the one that probably kind of is quite hilarious in many, many ways, but. It's hard to pick up any other ones. I mean, I really liked Thomas Muller's, I think it was his second goal against England, the counter-attack where, I can't remember who it was, but they left Gareth Barry for dust in that goal. And he pulls it across and Muller seals it. I mean, that is a very, very good goal. So a bit of a shout-out for that one. But I think all the big ones have really been mentioned. And I kind of...
There was a goal Mesut Ozil scored as well at some point against somebody that looked really good. But I feel sad because I never actually got to pick any of the 4-1 ones. For all we said, Germany were able to work with us, Jabawonga, whatever it's called.
Jabulani.
Yeah, Jabulani. Okay. But if Germany can work with that ball, Forlan somehow managed to work with it as well, because he was scoring goals that would have looked like they fit in 2006 because they were those kind of quality.
Forlan scored one good goal against South Africa, I think, didn't he? In this second group game, I'm pretty sure one of his goals was a very good finish.
He scored a cracker against Ghana, against Ghana in the quarter final.
That's right.
And then he scored a raker against Germany in the third place game as well.
They scored a bucket load. It was absolutely brilliant goals.
But this was a tournament that Forlan, he obviously went back to Atletico Madrid. He was starting to find his form again. He was one of these frustrated players that never happened for him at United. And, I thought at Uruguay, that was his tournament. Like, this was the tournament where he really shone for me. And, it was a shame, obviously, we talk about Suarez, but because Forlan, I felt, was their best player, in my opinion.
Suarez got some good goals in this game as well.
He did.
This tournament as well. But I think Forlan's were just top notch.
His
I
goal
never
against
picked
his
any
career
of
was outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there were some decent goals in this tournament. I mean, before I get your reflections on both tournaments before we wrap up, because we are nearing 10 o'clock on the Monday, see if you can guess who was commentating for ITV alongside Clive Tildesley, because Jim Beglin was ruled out with sickness. He was a Scotsman.
Stuart for McCoist.
Nope.
Really?
It was Craig Burley. You're right.
Was he doing it
never
there?
going to get
Yeah.
that.
He was on his way back, and he got a call to say, "Can you come back to South Africa for the final?" Because Jim Beglin's not recovered from whatever illness he had.
Yeah.
I remember him commentating with Derek Ray in Scottish football back in the day.
Yeah, that's right.
Has he done
Right
that?
about that time.
Jim Beglin was a very underrated commentator at co-coms. I didn't mind Beglin. He was all right.
Aye, he was decent. He's no Guy Mowbray though, is he, Grant? But that was that. To be fair, I'm a big fan of Guy Mowbray as well.
Yeah.
I'm just jealous of the fact that you got to meet him. But Guy, it was Guy's first World Cup final that year as well.
It was.
And
It was a shame he got a stinker, to be honest.
yeah, he admitted that he was glad that Spain won that game because the Dutch were so brutal. So yeah, just sum up, guys, your quick reflections on World Cups 2006, 2010, because although Scotland weren't there, how much did you appreciate them as neutrals? I get that it's 2010. I've already gone on record saying maybe wasn't the best, but to be fair, there was lots of talking points and controversy and drama involved with the tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's how I'd sum it up. I think when I think about 2010, I think about, as I said, the senses of the tournament as well. I think about the colour, the noise, the sounds, the colours, the atmospheres. It was just an incredible atmosphere. Although Chris doesn't like the vuvuzelas, but yeah, I mean, it's iconic. But as you said, John, the controversy reigns in this tournament, but not just, we talked about Lampard there, we talked about, Suarez, we've talked about the final itself, which was littered with talking points. It was certainly a tournament that will kind of be remembered for that, probably more so than the actual football itself. But it just, as I said right at the very top, it put Africa as a continent on the global stage in world football, and that's how I remember this tournament.
Yeah, definitely. It's but I mentioned the Netherlands and Spain final, but that wasn't the most brutal game that Netherlands were involved in. Go look up the Battle of Nuremberg, and you'll get tales of Portugal versus Netherlands 2006. Charlie, your feelings in these World Cups?
They're my early football memories, I would say. Obviously, like following Hibs, as everyone who listens to this podcast knows, like I've been going for years, but I would say the early international tournaments really were the foundation of just why I love football. Just being able to be a neutral and just seeing good football. So I'll always remember them highly, not because the quality was great in 2010 by a long shot, but just really good and really good memories as well. Like, as I said, watching the games at school and just being excited for lunch to come in because we knew there was going to be a game on. Just really good memories, I would say.
And Chris, for you, you and I are also similar ages and remember going back to the 90s, and we usually harp on about the 90s at times, but 2006, 2010 for different reasons, ones to look back on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a World Cup of contrasts here, because 2006 was one of the best, and 2010 was probably one of the worst. I think even the stats back it up. It's like the least amount of goals, and like the final was terrible because Howard Webb ruined that. It was just that there's so much contrast between the two. It's quite amazing. I mean, 2006 will always be special to me because I got to go, and I hope one day I do get to see Scotland at a major tournament myself. I know you guys, like John, you were over in Germany a couple of years ago, and there's no way in hell I'm going to America. But I hope someday I do get to see that, because if I don't, this will be as close as I get. I got to see Poland. It was a dead rubber, but I got there anyway. A team I care about. I've seen Scotland beat Poland in the Nations League, which is great. When I went to Warsaw, I was right. But yeah, I will always, as you say, there is always, even in the bad ones, there's games you remember and go, that was a good day, that was a good one, that was a good one. And 2010's got them as well. And those are the things that cling to it. I mean, even 1990, like my first World Cup, the final was dreadful in that one as well. But there are so many good points up to that before it. Like you remember the likes of Toto Scalacci and things like that. So these tournaments are exactly the same. Like I think if we get a tournament as good as 2006, now I think we'll be spoiled. I don't think we will. I don't think it's going to be it definitely won't be as organised as well. It definitely won't be accessible to people, given how the extortionate amount of money that Americans are stealing off people. But FIFA backed, I will give that because it's not just them. The Canadians and Mexicans are caught up in that as well. But as terms of quality, I would love to see as many great goals as we saw in 2006. Let's start shooting from outside the box again. Let's have a ball that nobody can save. That's what I want. Let's do that.
Well, McGinn, McTominay, etc. You know what to do in training. I'm ahead of this World Cup. So, of course, by the time this podcast goes out, it will not be 5,814 days. That was from 11th of July 2010. It's actually 28 days till the first game of the World Cup.
5,814 is the cheapest ticket for the tournament.
Yeah, and you might get a hot dog for that. Anyway,
no bus. You're not getting a bus to the game.
Yeah, let's not go there. But no, thanks, Krys, Charlie, and Grant for your time. Keep tuning in for more episodes of SFF Podcast, and we should have a Premiership review next week, which Josh is hosting, because he did mention the group chat. So if it doesn't fall through, Josh, you're to blame. Bye for now, guys.
Happy football.